For the past few years, I've been working on a project that explores the way adoption of children relates to Unitarian Universalist theology. A large part of the research was interviewing other UU ministers who are adoptive parents or birth parents or adoptees. I asked each of them how their experience of adoption supported or challenged their understanding of UU faith. I was able to talk with 15 other ministers and heard some pretty incredible stories of joy and heartache and faith. Among all the stories and beliefs, the most common response was a reference to our first and seventh principles. You know them, you've heard them. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote number one, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and number seven, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. That particular language comes from the principles and purposes that were adopted in 1985, but those two ideas are really rooted in our faith tradition for the past couple of hundred years. When pressed with a question about how adoption connected with their UU faith, ministers first and foremost spoke of the inherent worth and dignity of every person and the interdependent web. I shouldn't have been surprised by their response. These two principles are where most UUs turn to describe our faith. Even more than that, adoption is a manifestation of the idea that every human being deserves a chance. Regardless of where they come from or anything they've done or said, regardless of their race or physical condition, every human being has worth and deserves an opportunity to thrive. Birth parents make an agonizing decision to relinquish a child. Part of that choice is the difficult recognition of their inability to provide a fair chance for the child. Another part of the choice is recognizing that the birth parents themselves deserve the chance to thrive in a way that parenting would make impossible. Relinquishment is an incredibly difficult choice. It's a choice to honor human worth and dignity. Adoptive parents also make a choice to honor worth and dignity. They cross all sorts of barriers, both real and perceived, to build a family. In interviews, one adoptive parent put it this way. She said, "I know that in some circles of popular culture, poverty means that you are worthless, and that our child was born into tremendous poverty made him worthless." She said, "I feel so clearly there is nothing that makes you worthless. Nothing. There's nothing, certainly not poverty. For me, that's sort of the point that this is about. Really recognizing worth and dignity of every child and every family." In generations past, and sometimes still today, the idea of an adoptee being chosen is lifted up. I imagine the idea of being chosen is an attempt to make an adoptee feel like they're unique and that the bond with their adoptive parents is special. But choosing another human being to adopt while leaving others behind, or conversely, having been chosen for some mysterious attribute beyond your control, carries all kinds of complicated connotations. In these interviews, one minister who is an adoptive parent put it this way. She said, "I have trouble with metaphors like 'we chose you,' because the flip side of that is somebody didn't choose you. The love has to be unconditional. I don't love you because I chose you and you were the best one. I love you because you're a child in my home. I want to repeat that because to me, it's one of the most beautiful descriptions of honoring inherent worth and dignity that I have ever heard. I don't love you because I chose you and you were the best one. I love you because you're a child in my home. We covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Adoption isn't just about individuals, it's mostly about relationship. It's a method of building families. It also sheds a light on human connection that transcends great cultural divides. One minister that I spoke with came to see the interdependent web in a whole new way through the course of adopting his daughter. He and his partner thought long and hard, first about the choice to adopt, and then about their openness and ability to adopt an African American child. As white people who were deeply committed to racial justice, they knew that transracial adoption is not something to walk into lightly. Finally, some African American members of the congregation that this minister serves said that they would be glad to be present, to help cultivate a sense of Black cultural identity, to deal with the very specific pieces of cultural difference. Through that conversation, they came to realize that they were ready to adopt and even more to parent an African American child. Theirs was an open adoption. All the members of both families got to know each other quite well. They still gathered for family reunions. In the interview, the minister spoke about a broader sense of family underneath the differences. Beyond one family being Black and the other being white, they had socioeconomic differences, educational differences, geographical differences. They weren't even in the same city. Yet they found a profound sense of connection. In the interview, this minister said, all that stuff, and yet we feel a sense of oneness. Our child just happens to be the context that's brought us all together. I love that observation. Our child just happens to be the context that's brought us all together. It's as if to say this unity, this web of relation existed long before the child came along. But their experience of adoption shed a light on the much deeper truth of their fundamental interdependence. Another adoptive parent talked about experiencing the interdependent web through an adoption across a great distance. In this case, it was an international adoption of a child who was born in the midst of a civil war. The parent said, he's most definitely my son, but I also feel like I'm raising him for a greater goal, a greater purpose, a greater family. And that unity of somebody thousands of miles away gave birth to a child that I would ultimately raise. With this tremendous sense of wonder, she said, we really are connected. We really are. Sometimes we think of interdependence as something that just is, regardless of what we do. I also think it's something we build over time. There's a theologian named Mark Lewis. He talks about struggle with one another as the core aspect of human being. He thinks our network of connection is built as we struggle against one another and as we struggle with each other against life. In interviews, I heard plenty of stories of struggle. One story, though, highlighted the way struggling together weaves this web of connection. This minister was an adoptee, and she told me about the experience of caring for her first newborn child after a difficult labor and a cesarean section. She was completely overwhelmed at home. Her husband's family lived nearby and offered to help, but this new mother wanted her own adopted mother to come help. She said, "It was one of the most tender experiences of my life because my mom said, 'I never got to have this with you.' And she got to have it with my baby. And that was so amazing and so powerful. Having my mom, who was just as new to this as I was. That was a really great experience. And I felt really blessed to be able to give her that with my kid." Some of you I know have personal relationship with adoption of children, and I'd love to hear how that experience has impacted your faith. Most of you, though, don't have personal experience with adoption. The question I pose to you is, how have you seen the inherent worth and dignity of every person and the interdependent web of all existence manifest in your life? These ideas seem so common to us as Unitarian Universalists, but they're more than cute sayings to post on social media. They're statements about how we believe the universe is organized and our place in it. They're big, bold, even radical ideas that are tough to live up to. This year, more than any other I can remember in American history, we're confronted with the daily challenge to recognize the humanity within our neighbors. All of our neighbors. And truly recognizing the interdependent web and living according to that reality, that's enough of a spiritual journey to fill 5 lifetimes. Doing this research, talking with people about their faith and adoption has been such a blessing. I've heard so many stories of how our core values are made real and so concrete in people's lives. Adoption is just one of the innumerable different life experiences that can shape a person's faith. We've all experienced awe at creation. We have been blessed with life-changing relationships. We have grieved losses and found within our own hearts a trove of mysteries. So I invite you to give some substance to those ideas that we espouse, to make your faith a little more real. I invite you to remember some of the ways you have experienced the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Where have you seen, felt, and deeply known the interdependent web? The more we recognize these truths in concrete ways, the better prepared we will be to live up to the challenge that they present. Amen.